We're good. We're live. Hey everyone, it's Dan from the Progress Campaign for another live Q&A series. We're going to focus this time on Texas. We've gotten a lot of questions and a lot of intrigue over the past couple of weeks, and in particular the past couple of days, since all the other networks and organizations and forecasts have started moving over Texas into the toss-up and otherwise column. Do want to give a shout out to not just us, but to Lean Toss-Up. Who also had Texas earlier on as more of a toss-up category. We hopefully are going to be talking to the brains behind the lean toss-up model, to Robert. Hopefully we'll try to either record an interview with him or just go live with him sometime over the weekend or maybe before. So yeah, we're going to dive directly. We've got enough to cover pretty much any introduction about Texas that I can do. So the first question is about early voting. What does early voting and the totals mean for the election? Do they benefit Trump or Biden? So probably, as a lot of you have heard from all the news stories coming out and all the numbers, whether it be on social media or TV, about 8.5 million Texans have already voted. And to put that in context, 8.97 million voted in total in 2016. Now there are still a couple days left, a day or two left of early voting, and then we obviously have election day voting. We have a couple more days between to process mail ballots, particularly obviously in Texas. Those are scarcer because you have to be over the age of 65 or have a relevant medical excuse in order to vote. So what a lot of folks are projecting that we can see anywhere from 10.5 to 12 million voters in total. And overall, these are primarily benefiting Joe Biden. I think we have a question a little later on about, can Trump actually add voters to his 2016 totals, and where does that come from? But these primarily are new Democratic coalition types of voters. And these are particularly younger voters. We've seen a massive surge all across the country of younger voters actually showing up this time and voting. These are not just 29 to 45-year-olds, but these are also 18 to 24-year-olds, a lot of college students. There was a story in the Texas Tribune today about obviously, cherry picking these particular cases of folks driving 4 hours from Fort Worth to Houston in order to vote, from different university campuses to different where folks live. But in general, we've seen a big surge of younger voters, and that's one of the big reasons why we're seeing such large numbers. As well as we're seeing that the surge in voters are happening in particular in big suburban areas where Biden is expected to do well. If we look at district level polling in the Houston area, we're seeing about a 16-point swing. If you look at the 22nd district and other districts in the region, it's about a 16-point swing from where it was in 2016. If you look at the Austin area, it's about an 11-point swing. If you look at the Dallas area, that's blowing it out of the park, and you're seeing a 20, 21, 22-point swing when you look at district or county level polls in the region. And that really is where the surge of voting is happening. And these are primarily areas where Biden is going to do well. These are new voters who moved in from out of state. These are newly registered voters, meaning anyone who was 14 years old up until 18 who is now registered to vote, as well as a lot of folks moving out of the urban cities. You're talking about folks who might have been younger and not participating in politics, then they sort of, grow up, start families, or move out to the suburbs, and that sort of, we've seen a lot of that shift and swing in the suburbs as a result. So yeah, most of the early voting is benefiting Biden in a great way right now. But obviously, we're still waiting to see how much of that is actually going to be able to push Biden over the finish line in just a couple of days. So the second question is, what is the state of the State House? Are Democrats poised to take control, or will Republicans maintain a slim victory, a slim majority, excuse me? So I'm hesitant to declare or state that Democrats are favored to take control right now, simply because there are going to be a lot of elections that are going to be very close. But overall, yes. Overall, we do see signs pointing to the fact that Democrats will gain either tie, which is unlikely, but can gain a very low majority in the state house. And that's simply because, like the numbers we talked about beforehand, most of these, I mean, all of these seats of these swing districts that the Democrats are targeting are in these areas like Houston and Austin and Dallas, which have moved anywhere from, like we said, 11 to 22% from where it was in 2016, another 4 or 5% from where it was in 2018. And with those numbers, and given the margins that some of these folks have lost by in 2018, then you could you definitely can see and imagine that this further swing presidential level turnout, much higher energy overall than in 2018, because there's actually something that where it's not just that Democrats are riled up to vote for these folks who want to make sure that Texas expands Medicaid and all these different policy positions, but there's also a high anti-Trump energy, and that is moving a lot of these districts more to the left. So again, overall, it's going to be very close, but Democrats do have the advantage of taking control of the state house as of right now. So the next question is about our turnout model. Most turnout models predict 12 million voters, where you have it is about 10 million. Will that adjust, or do you expect a lower turnout? As of now, we do not expect 12 million people to show up in Texas. We do believe it'll be over 11 million, but right now our model is adjusting live to the data we're getting. We don't change the parameters of our models or our algorithms at all unless there's something drastic. So we're not. So we're just right now we're just waiting for the early vote to finish. We're waiting for the processed or returned absentee ballots by county. We then use different models that we run to break that down by precinct, and then project that out to our model, to our turnout model. So it could end up being 12 million, but right now it's just adjusting slowly. So as you've seen, I think it was just under 10 million when Biden first took the lead, and now it's about 10.35 million votes. So we expect it to get to about 11 million, but again, we're not going to adjust that all at once because we don't mess with the parameters of the model, because we don't want to skew it one way or the other based on what we're feeling can happen. We just let the data work itself through the model. So again, I don't know if 12 million people would show up in Texas, but we expect it to be over 11 million, and these numbers are going to adjust as it is, as we get closer to the election. Next question is from Dave. Sorry, I did not, I stopped mentioning names here. I was just scribbled little notes by our team here. But Dave asks, do you do tracker polls in Texas? No, we do not do any tracker polls in Texas. We had a relatively limited amount of resources when we did polling and tracker polls and surveys. And we focused more on regions around the country which have a large correlation to other regions. So like we talked about in our first forecasts series Q&A, we do have a lot of tracker polls in states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and some places in Kansas and Montana, because there's a big correlation between a lot of those counties and precincts which we do these tracker polls that correlate to different areas in the country, that we can then sort of see, hey, this area in Minnesota is a lot like this area in Wisconsin. So if folks are moving a lot more towards Biden there. So in Texas, we do not have any tracker polls. But recently there's been quite an uptick in the amount of polls conducted in Texas, particularly at the district level. So you can head over to the 538 polling or on our own forecast and scroll down, and you can get those polls. Next question, saying has 538 has Texas going to Trump by 3? What makes you confident that Joe Biden will win Texas? Well, confident is not exactly the word I would use when you look at forecast models. Right now, at the most recent update, Joe Biden is leading 5 million to 4.95 million by about 0.9%. So that's well within the margin of error in Texas, which is close to 3%. So it's not confident that Biden wins Texas, but right now when we average out all this data and we look at all this data from precincts all the way up to to individual states, we're seeing significant enough data to present to conclude that Biden right now would be ahead. But again, this is, I would not use the word confident. It is well within the margin of error, and Trump could end up eking out as much as a 1 or 2 point victory. At this case, if a lot of the data that we're using, like polls, and a lot of the turnout data that we're using, like this early voting, ends up being skewed a little bit more towards Trump than it is towards Biden. So the next question from Janet is, does high turnout favor Democrats? Overall, yes. We do expect Trump to continue to move up in his vote totals, meaning more folks are going to show up for Trump. These are, somewhat working class voters in certain areas which are moving over. These are suburban folks who voted for Gary Johnson but are going to end up voting for Trump this time. These are voters who stayed home in 2016 because they didn't think that Texas was competitive, but now that it is, you're going to have quite a bit more of a surge of Republican voters, particularly in rural areas, which generally don't turn out as high a percentages in some of these sort of more suburban areas or suburban conservative areas. But overall, like Beto O'Rourke likes to say, Texas is not a red state, it's a non-voting state. So the higher the turnout as a percentage of registered voters is, the more that favors Democrats. So right now our model predicts just under 1.2 million more Democrats are going to show up, or more voters are going to show up for Joe Biden than they did for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And as we know, Beto O'Rourke brought out about 100. He got about 100 or 150,000 more votes than Hillary Clinton got in 2016. And obviously that's not one for one, but so the answer is yes. The higher the turnout is going to be, and if we see a last minute surge in early voting, if we see, a larger surge on election day, that might even mean that instead of it being lopsidedly Republican, it actually can end up being more measured and favoring Democrats. So I think what has to be the last question because of scheduling, but will more Trump supporters show up on election day to even out the score? This is from, sorry, I forgot about mentioning the names here, but from Twitter. I mean, obviously, most of the polls that we've seen have showed, about 50 to 60% of Biden voters are expected to vote early, and about probably 50, 60, 70% or about, depending on the poll, are expected to show up on election day for Trump. So we obviously are going to see a big surge. The exact number we don't really know. I mean, we're projecting roughly 2 million people to show up on election day. It could be a little more, it could be a little less, but that's the ballpark that we're looking at. We do expect them to be lopsidedly Republican. We expect a lot of these, if you go down the list of the percentage of voters relative to 2016 vote totals that have showed up, the lower percentages are generally more conservative areas, or generally more Hispanic Latino areas as well, but are generally more conservative. So we do expect that to even out a little bit, given the fact that we know from different surveys, we know from different organizations and campaigns on the ground, which are actually getting feedback live from folks in early voting, that these 8.5 million voters are pretty lopsidedly Democratic. It's not 70-30, obviously, but it's there are a lot of it's pretty there's pretty a sizable lead among Democratic voters, among folks who already voted. So we do expect it to even out on election day. Yeah, so unfortunately, I think we got to head on to other parts of the schedule. We're actually doing a bunch of interviews with folks running for the State House in Texas. You can head over to our YouTube channel to check those interviews out. They're going to be uploaded later today or tomorrow morning. We are going to definitely try to get a few more much longer forecast Q&As going on, maybe on Sunday, really taking a deeper dive into everything that we're looking at on election day, a deep dive into our forecast. We'll try to do that in conjunction with Robert from Lean Tossup or from also the guys from Plural Vote or JHK Forecasting. or forecasts, and we're gonna stay tuned to the next couple of days. We're gonna put out what we're going to do throughout Election Day. Also, I think the team wanted me to point out that we are having some delays in updating our maps, our interactive county maps, because we're running a lot of Election Day simulations from now until the election, and some of that information is getting cross-wired and or not really cross-wired, but it's getting it's being delayed vote totals because it's running through our Election Day simulations instead of through the live models. So if you can bear with us, and by Saturday morning we're going to have all that updated, and obviously Sunday afternoon we're going to have a big update in the forecast. It's probably pretty much going to be static until Election Day, and then on Election Day at about noon Eastern, it's going to start updating with the data that we're getting back from exit polls, from campaigns, from organizations, from get out the vote operations, and trying to match and adjust our forecast to that data. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you probably either tomorrow or Sunday for the next Q&A.
My dear friends, your vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the honor we have to create a more perfect union.
Hey everyone, this is Dan from the Progress Campaign.